5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to this week's edition of the EUVC Lowdown, the show that wraps up the week in European venture, discussing the things making the headlines. We have a small, cozy crew joining us today with Dan Bowyer, partner from SuperSeed, David and Andreas, the duo of EUVC, and I'm your host, Cathy White, founder of CEW Communications. I am looking at my calendar right now and getting slightly scared by the fact that there is only 9 days left until Christmas. Has anyone here actually completed all of their Christmas shopping before I get into the podcast today?
You are talking to boys.
My reply was about to be, yeah, my wife has.
You are talking to boys, not even grown men. You're talking to boys, you silly person.
I'm really glad, Dan, that we stick to the gender stereotypes on the show.
In the petrol station on Christmas Eve, that packet of cookies looks very Christmas present worthy.
Because I know for a fact that my wife does not listen in on any of our podcasts. I can now say here 9 days before Christmas that she's going to get an indoor sauna for her present from me. Yeah, it's super weird, but she's always cold, and I thought, what the fuck, let's give her a sauna.
It's not a blanket, darling, or a jumper, it's a freaking sauna. That's quite a...
Are we talking like a thing that you have to fully install? How does this work?
You do need to fully install it, but it's also just, so it's an infrared one, so you do still just plug it in, and then it's like, and we've got a pretty big bathroom, so it fits. So it's going to be interesting to see her face when she...
I love the Scandis. I love the Scandi innovations.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, right?
The next lowdown, or the first lowdown of the year, you can join in from the sun. That would be fun.
Yeah, I'll have my camera on.
Please do.
Kathy might be unavailable that week. Anyway, well, talking of hot things.
Nice segue.
Thanks. So we were joking just before the record about the name for this, and David called it the burn down. Because one of the things that I posted on LinkedIn this week, it started the week off on Monday by talking about having burnout, which I know I can come up on the show and I can sound really peppy and I can be smiley and all of these things. But last week I hit a wall. Last week I had panic attacks. I had the full shebang, and I think a lot of people potentially are feeling this way right now as we get closer and closer to the end of the year, and feel this insane, immense pressure that I feel happens every December like clockwork. It's like we don't necessarily believe that January of the following year is actually going to happen. There's a crazy rush to get as much done as possible, whilst adding on lots of extra bits of pressure like Christmas shopping, seeing your family, dependent on your relationship with them, numerous things going on. And I was quite fortunate, lucky, I guess, when I posted this on LinkedIn this week. I actually did it just because I thought it might be useful to a few people that connect with me on LinkedIn. And the lovely journalist folks at LinkedIn News actually shared it wider. So it got picked up and connected with a bunch of strangers on the internet who are all feeling the same things. So we thought we'd touch on this for a little bit on today's show. Bit of a check-in to all of our listeners. Hopefully you're not feeling too bad, and there may be some things that we've done whenever we've felt a little bit overstressed that may be useful to you, but also just to bring the burnout thing back down to founders and also to VCs themselves. All right, it's been a big year. There's a lot of extra pressure in this year. Dan, I'm going to bring you in on this. I'll ask you a more personal question if you don't mind. What's your own experience of feeling burnout? Have you ever had this struggle?
I live in a consistent, perpetual state of anxiety and stress, and because I'm an extrovert but an introvert inner, so I've got an extrovert wrapper around a very, very strong introvert body, but everything I've done has been extrovert and out there and talking or public speaking or doing some version. But when I as a founder, which I spent most of my career on the other side of the desk rather than as a VC, 20 years building and fucking up businesses. I remember the first time I experienced real burnout. We were up against the wall. It was my first business. I was mid-20s, 16 people, and I couldn't make payroll. And it had been building, and I'd been fingers in the ears, nothing to see here, everything's going to be fine, we're going to be fine, being the rah in public, and then behind the scenes. And I didn't have a partner, I didn't have any friends that understood what I was going through, and I, at that point, wasn't part of any support networks. So I felt in my mid-20s having this massive ego and being this kind of walking stick of ego that I could cope with everything, and I didn't need any help, and I didn't need to share, and I didn't need all these things. So it built and got to a point where, Friday when payroll came around, I couldn't make payroll. That it it all hit and everything crumbled. So yeah, I've experienced it many times. It's something I'm very conscious of. It's something that I talk about a lot, and it's something that I share with founders a lot, and it's something that I feel very passionate about. And I have lots of very boring pocket phrases and anecdotes and stories about the journey of burnout. And I think it's just one thing before I shut up that I think is important to note is that the kind of people that tend to start businesses, which I split into two camps, there's entrepreneurs and business managers. But if you're an entrepreneur, not a business manager, like sign writing somebody else's stuff and selling somebody else's stuff, if you're genuinely an entrepreneur and building something new and innovative and trying new things, the kind of people that tend to take that journey are a little mentally cooked anyway. We are the slightly odd, slightly cooked, slightly unusual brigade, and the world needs us, these people, this community, because without us, there would be no progress. There would be no change in forward motion. So we are an incredibly important, well, not me anymore, I'm on the other side of this, but founders are an incredibly important part of that ecosystem. But just keep in mind, your propensity to burn out and struggle and have mental health challenges and see the world differently and be a bit fizzy brained is probably more than most. So that's the baseline. So you probably are going to experience these things at some point if you haven't already.
Yeah, I was actually gonna just share with the listeners that when I saw Cathy's post, I actually went in. I was literally like cooking and I stopped because I thought, oh, this is actually really relevant, because the last couple of months they've been quite tough for me personally in terms of managing everything, as Cathy was saying. But I've realized that I am really bad at identifying my own stress and anxiety and identifying when does it spike and when doesn't it. So in the interest of my own personal development and hopefully our listeners, I'd love to ask everyone here, right? What kind of triggers, like what have you learned over the years of how to identify when you're going into this kind of overdrive kind of mental state? What are the triggers that you now kind of are more attentive to? How are the ways that you're kind of finding within yourself to manage it? Because I do find that myself a challenge where when I go into those extreme levels of stress or anxiety or whatever it is, that I then kind of almost become my own worst enemy, right? Without realizing it, right? So I'd love to hear what you guys have learned over time.
Yeah, so I have a few, and I'm still working on spotting them at the right time. But the big flags for me are, I put some of them in the post that I put up there, right? But basically, if I completely stop looking after myself in the right way, or looking after myself doesn't seem a priority against the work that I need to get done. So for me, it's sounds grim, right? But I haven't left my flat in a few days, or I didn't shower this morning when I woke up. And in fact, I've just forgotten to eat a bunch of meals because I've just been at my desk getting through all of the other things. And then the other big red flag for me is that's not an issue with alcohol, but basically when I'm turning to something else to kind of cut back any emotions that might be bubbling up. So that does look like drinking more in the evening every single day for me, rather than just it's a nice thing and I'm enjoying a bottle. It's become like a medicinal rather than actually just something because you enjoy it. So that for me it's a combination of lots of different things, and ultimately I kind of spin out and I get to a point where my brain can't see straight. So you feel so overwhelmed by all of the different things that are going on that you actually can't make a single decision on what you do next. That for me is like the peak, and then I normally completely fall apart.
Now you know those things, and you can obviously recognize those journeys earlier, or those endpoints slightly earlier. How do you change your behavior, or what do you do to soften the blow or avoid the pitfalls? How and what do you do to change that outcome?
Yeah, so I'll talk you through what I did last week on Wednesday, because Wednesday was basically my tipping point. So Wednesday was a day of panic attacks, tears, and then taking some accountability back and actually bringing those boundaries back.
So you needed to break to get there?
Almost, yeah. I don't think I actually fully needed to break, but it just happened. So one of the things, we were briefly talking about this before we hit record as well, but in the last couple of months, I started having singing lessons. And singing was something that I did as a teenager, as a kid. I loved it. And I brought it back, like after being twice the age I was when I stopped having singing lessons. I brought it back a few months ago, and then I haven't been able to attend any of them because of travel, etc., etc. And I had one scheduled for Wednesday last week, and it was the first time I was going to go see Ro, my singing teacher, in ages. And about 10-15 minutes before I was meant to be there, I was stood in the bedroom in my flat, basically close to tears, looking at Brendan going, I can't go. There's too many things to do. I was having a freak out because of client demands, basically. And my husband was very good. He actually pushed me basically out the door. He was like, go do your singing lesson. And as I walked to the singing lesson, I had a bit of a panic attack. I have a weird thing when I'm feeling overwhelmed and I'm in crowds. It's a bit like you, Dan, you were saying that extroverted introvert. On the outside, I'm loud and everything, but inside I'm like, I just want to hide away and be on my own for a little bit. And I had that feeling going through a crowd. I went and did my singing lesson, and the singing lesson was fantastic. I don't think I've sung that well in a lesson in forever. It was like all of my emotions were coming out just through doing something creative, which was really helpful. But also on the way there, I cancelled everything else I had that afternoon. I just messaged people, messaged clients, and I said, I'm really sorry, for personal reasons, I can't do the call today. And I just gave myself space. It's a hard thing to do when you feel like you've got to deliver as much as possible, as quickly as possible, to actually go, you know what you want of a person that I meant to talk to, actually, I'm more important than this. You don't have to go into the ins and outs of what's happened, but just taking a bit of time and a bit of space. It was creating that space to allow the introvert to breathe a little. That was really helpful. So that's what I did last week. And then since then, I've just tried to do nice things. Like I had a massage, I went and did another singing lesson, eaten lots of really nice food, and I've slept loads.
Did you do any breathing exercises?
Yeah, sometimes. I don't have too much success with them.
Have you done yoga?
Not for a very long time.
Yeah,
I did a spin class this week. That was useful.
yoga to me is moving meditation. So yoga to me is about breathing and control. And I find that really helpful, because what you can do when you start on that journey of overwhelm, you can start to very quickly breathe, and within a minute you can change your mindset. And all you have to do is create those marginal gains to take either the edge off or to avoid the pitfalls. You can put in some very strategic things. We're very practical biological creatures. So if you do certain things, you get certain outcomes. If you're pushing your body and mind too hard, you will break. So you can do things that will definitely take either the edge off a challenging moment in your time, or you can stop them completely. Yeah. I think this does raise one other thing that I wanted to just quickly talk about, which is the concept of self-awareness as an investor investing in founders, because you have a lot of noise on LinkedIn and other social platforms, for example, talking about investors wanting founders to be self-aware and smart and kind and loyal and thoughtful and all the things that make up decent human beings. But at the same time, there is this underlying subtone where you actually want them to be animals working 20 hours a day, not giving a fuck about anyone or anything, and being narcissistic psychopaths. So I'm not saying that I want that of my founding teams, but there is a time to run with ego, and there is a time to learn when to drop the ego and to look after yourself and to be self-aware. And I think the greatest trick that I've learned as a founder was learning the self-awareness piece, which is a forever peeling onion. It's never an end point. We go, oh, blimey, I'm self-aware, I'm done, I understand myself, I know all my triggers. That is bullshit. You never get to that point. It's a never-ending evolution. However, what you can do, and what I've learned to almost play act, is I don't give a fuck. I'm going to be a narcissistic psychopath. I'm just going to go for stuff. I don't care. Go. Everything else out the door, I'm going to go for something. And also knowing when to stop and go, I need to drop all that nonsense and pay attention to people. And you don't always get the timings or the veracity right, but I think there's a double-edged sword to being self-aware.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's interesting when you're talking about that the self-awareness piece, because I think when you moving closer to burnout and your self-awareness is completely whacked, then actually you basically have to go back to the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like you've got to rebuild from the foundation. So it's the nurturing piece, it's having time, it's getting rest, it's eating all the good stuff, it's getting outside, seeing nature, and then go upwards from there. And hopefully the self-awareness comes back every single time. Very repetitive. Or you just have to, do really nice things like jump into infrared saunas.
I am sitting here very quiet because I do know that I pressure myself a lot to do what we do, but I'm then thinking, why is it that I haven't burned out? Because I have a lot of friends who have, really gotten those anxiety hits and also been out for 6 and 9 months completely, right? And ended in depressions. And they have kind of been living the same life as I am. So I'm a bit wondering why I haven't hit that at any point. And I don't know, Dan, what do you think about children? Because I think having children and knowing your responsibility towards them, because I have a rule that says that I need to be with them 2 to 3 hours every day. So that's in the morning and in the afternoon. Maybe kind of think that as long as I have that rule, and I also know that I can't be stressed to the level where I can't be present with them, well, that also automatically ensures that I have those 2 to 3 hours every day where I'm there 100% with them. And I also know that as a rule, I cannot overwork myself in the evening, because then I know that I blow up the day after, or after 3 or 4 days of long evenings working. So I think that it's the children and me really always being attentive to being the dad that I want to be.
What were you like before kids, Andreas? How did you? Because I mean, some people, like Mads, my business partner you've met, has never experienced these feelings. He's a machine. He just doesn't have that kind of brain chemistry, whereas most entrepreneurs do. And I think that's where the magic is. I think that's what creates the edge and the push and the weirdness and the trying new things. I think there's something in that fizz in the brain that creates wonderful things. But what were you like before kids?
Okay, I did have a period where I did a bit of, let's call it rejuvenating drugs to take the edge off the afternoon or the late evenings. So in that sense, that was maybe not the healthiest period. But I think that where I, you referred to Mass as being a machine. I think that if there's anything that David will also concur on, is I am a very, very optimistic guy, and I'm very, very quick to drop anger with anything.
That's a great way to do.
And I think that because that is so strong with me that it's even a problem, because it of course also has negatives that you're very quick to move on. But I think that is probably also what ensures that I don't get over anxious about things, because I'm very quick to say, okay, fuck it, let's move on. So as David said, my reaction to driving in the car and then all of a sudden running out of gas, my reaction was me laughing. and I think that is very much my reaction to most things. And since I really think that when you put things in connection to the big things in life, there's not a lot of stuff that's a really big problem, right? Yes, of course, if you can't make payroll, that's a huge problem. And how the fuck are you going to solve that? And if you can't, then I would probably also be in a bad situation. But that doesn't really happen that often, right? Unless you're running something on the edge, and we haven't been there, I think.
Well, kids are a great leveler. As soon as I had my first child, that was a priority, and it's a very cheesy, hackneyed thing to say, but that was a massive priority shift. Like, oh, I am no longer important. This is not about me, and that was a massive switch that just switched on fairly soon after he was born. I went, oh, I get this now. This is interesting. And that's actually quite a useful tool. The other useful tool, if you don't have kids, one thing you can do, which I learned mid founder experience, like almost 10 years in, I was way a dumbass late learner, but was to turn everything into an adventure. Somebody once told me, and I was struggling, and I struggle a lot with different scenarios, and everything bothers me, and I feel everything. So he said to me, just turn everything into an adventure. Just reframe it in your head. The emotion that you feel is going to pass. No feeling is final. So just turn it into an adventure, reframe it as, how can I learn? How can I take these skills and the awful experiences of whatever I'm feeling in that emotive state, put it in my backpack, go, that's really interesting. And then just flip everything to an adventure. And I do that. I breathe in, I do my breathing exercise, I go, okay, what am I going to learn? How am I going to take this and make it better next time, or avoid this happening in the next time? And I really flip it into a very practical, tangible learning experience. And even though it's really silly to say, it really works.
I don't think it's stupid at all.
Andreas, when you were talking about having the 2.5 to 3 hours with your kids and making sure that you're very fixed on that, you're talking about having healthy boundaries. It's protected time, and getting the balance right between the importance of the time that you protect versus the other stuff that you have to get done. I think when the importance shifts to the wrong way.
But Cathy, most founders can't do that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, I'm a founder. Not in a very lower key way. It comes up, but I think having something that does make you present, that's very powerful for bringing you back down.
We didn't talk about one thing which I'd love to ask you guys, because it's something that for me is important. Like Andreas and I have a cool dynamic, right? Because he is in many things what I'm not, and I am in many things what he's not, right? And we're also very open about kind of, Andreas can call me saying this thing is really bothering me, or the other way around, right? So what I find very useful for me in these days is two things. One, having a business partner that I can be open and honest and transparent with, but also having people in my personal life, loved ones, that I kind of signal and say, hey, like kind of, call me aside if you see this happening. If you see me going down to only thinking about work, I stop doing sports, I stop eating properly, I stop, I just live inside of a bubble, or as Cathy said, I don't leave the apartment, I don't shower, I don't whatever, right? And so I think kind of having that small support system around you, for me, has always been super important over the last like year and a half, 2 years.
Do the people that are around you, do they understand? Do they get it enough to know, or do they not need to?
They don't get the why, they don't get the how, they don't get anything. They do get the impact it has on me, and they do get the kind of triggers that I start understanding and I share with them, right? So I say, when you see this happening, like ping me, like tell me, and I will be stubborn. I won't want to listen. So you need to kind of shake me and say stop, right?
That's unusual. Most men I know would not have the capacity to do that. And I'm being sexist and generalist just to make a point, but a lot of men I know would not have the self-awareness to do that.
It's incredibly hard because you can't really say, like, I am completely unable to explain it, right? I am completely unable to explain it. It puts a lot of the onus on the other person. But when they start understanding, I think it makes a big difference of them kind of being able to also kind of ping you, and then you have that external kind of feedback, like, oh shit, okay, where's that coming from? And it kind of, it forces you to stop. So I find it incredibly useful.
Before my wife and I met, I would run myself into the ground, and then I'd do 2 or 3 days of just sleeping practically. And then that kind of got unsustainable. But she saw that then, right? And then she could tell me, honey, you need to start calming down, because otherwise you're going to get sick in 2 days. And then in the beginning I didn't listen, but then I realized, okay, I am losing 2 or 3 days once a month or every other month or so. And then, it has evolved to the same thing as David says here, having someone very close to you that says, I'm seeing that this is going to happen.
Yeah, it does remind me, it's slightly off topic, but it does remind me of another phrase that I was told a few years ago, which is, it's not that you can't do something, like, let's say, be self-aware or solve a problem or, be a thing. It's not that you can't do something, it's that you're actively choosing something else. And it always resonates with me when I get into that kind of myopic negative mindset. I'm actively choosing this. I might not consciously, but I'm subconsciously at least choosing to do or be or behave in a certain way. And if I get irritable, it's because I'm actively choosing, and sometimes it's at the cost or at the price of what you should be doing or how you should be feeling or where your brain should be.
So right now we are figuring out how the fuck are we going to manage that our son is starting school soon, and we are not sure exactly whether he's ready, and some special needs, and whether the school will be able to attend to those. That I am consciously avoiding, not diving too much into on an emotional level, because I know that I can't solve it, right? But that is something that I'm afraid, as that gets closer, it's going to be an anxiety that's going to show up in all kinds of different things, because I cannot do shit, right? Can I take him out and put him in a private school that costs $10K per month? No, I can't. Okay, so what the fuck can I do, right?
You'll find a way.
You have to, right?
Your job is just to be there.
Yeah, no, but then that's the thing, right? Can you be there if school is not good, right? It's 6, 7, 8 hours per day where you just cannot really influence it, other than you can be on the back of a teacher saying, but you know that teacher has 28 kids to take care of, so how the fuck?
That's a really tough one. And sometimes you come up against these where there isn't an obvious answer. But I always find that if you keep getting on a road and poking the bear and trying things, activity creates activity. And something you'll meet a lady at the school gates who's got an ex-teacher who looks after special needs kids or something. There'll be an angle, there'll be a thing that kind of manifests or materializes if you keep getting on the road.
Talking of that not being able to do things, right? When I realized that this might end up really blowing up, that's when I said, okay, well, how can we defend ourselves from the very, very worst situation? And then we penciled out how much money do we need for my wife to be able to not work in case we need it, right? And now I know that we have the money. We're in a position where we can do that, and then we can homeschool until we solve it. And that until we got that, a bit of home budget math done, is really that was a reliever for me, because I knew that the worst case scenario was that we would have to solve it in that way.
That's another great coping strategy, isn't it? When you feel that pressure point and you're at the end of it, it's like, what's the worst that can happen? Give me the worst. My legs aren't going to fall off. The sun is still going to rise tomorrow morning. It's like, if you take it to the nth degree as a thought machine experiment, what's the worst? Go and bring your worst. And then once you've got to that end point, everything before that is okay.
It's another useful tool. If you're the kind of person that I do this, when I fantasize about anything in my head, anything remotely regarding life, it always goes to the absolute worst imaginable place. You're in a sort of awful place.
Don't go there.
Yeah. Why am I
You
there?
catastrophize. That's what you're doing. There's a medical term for that.
Exactly. But with catastrophizing, if you even just say out loud what you think that catastrophe is, it takes away its power. Because 9 times out of 10, it's ridiculous. It's so stupid.
That's another one. Saying things out loud. It sounds weird, but talking to yourself out loud rather than keeping it as an inner monologue, massively helpful coping strategy. Yeah.
So I'm conscious we've spent a long time on burnout. So I've got one more question for each of you, and then I'm going to take us on to another topic. If you had to, I know everyone is different, right? Maybe think of it in 2 ways. Either what is the one thing that you are going to do until the end of the year to make sure that you're looking after yourself, or what advice would you give to someone else? Like a useful tool, something to try for anyone that might be feeling a bit burnt out right now.
I've got loads. I've got a list of things that I publish quite regularly around coping strategies and health and mental health more than physical, but there is obviously, you can't have one.
It's all connected.
The one thing that I was reminded of this year that I think people don't pay enough attention to, which is obvious but not obvious, is drinking more water. It's something that we don't do. We get most of our water intake, we get most of our water from food, and when you're feeling hungry, which way around is it? When you're feeling hungry, you're normally thirsty, I think it is. So, but we don't drink as a modern working species. We don't drink enough water, and it's more than 2. It's like 2 or 3 liters a day for most people, depending on your body construction. So I think that would be my numero uno reminder learning from this year.
Drink more water. I have water. I'm gonna lug this down in a second.
What I will say is, based on one of the most important reasons why I think that I don't have too much of an issue with burnouts, and why the people that have been closest to me have had that issue, and that is the feeling of existentially not be doing what you should be doing. And I think that you can definitely be in a situation. I think that, speaking of number one, right? If you don't think about, you might have a company that needs a bunch of things and so on, but is that the thing that you should be doing? Because obviously, if you're feeling like shit and everything, is that then the right path for you? Are you doing what's best for you? And my friends were not entrepreneurs, so for them it was an easier problem, right? Because it was just saying, well, obviously this is not the right job for me. I'm not doing something that is making me happier, and there's a bunch of other jobs out there that I could go and take. What we're doing with EUVC, we are deliberately building something that we want to run, that we want to own, that we want to be building for a long time. And for that reason, I don't really feel that I ever get stuck, because that's the main power driving me, is that I'm building the type of business that I want to run. And the whole idea goes out of it if I then start building something that I hate.
I feel like I must say I have no idea what I'm doing. I feel like most of us don't really have, or just doing our best and trying. But I actually think that talking about it, right? Even if you don't feel it, just talking about it, just asking people around you, how are they feeling about it? Are they feeling anxious? Are they feeling stressed? If you're going through it, talking about it with your colleagues, talking about it with your loved ones. I think just talking about it is a great first step, right? I think I would guess that most people feel it and don't really talk about it.
Entrepreneurs don't. You're spot on. Male entrepreneurs. I've met a lot in the last month that I can see are harboring, and I just want to shake them and say, and I don't know them well enough yet. And I mean, I'm quite pokey anyway, as you know, but I was like, just don't harbor this stuff. Talk, get it out. Expression is the counter depression. Just get it out of your head.
And if anyone out there is going through it and wants to talk about it, there's great communities out there, and the 4 of us are more than happy to help you connect with your peers and talk with your peers. It's the best thing to do, right? Discuss with your peers.
Yeah, I think every single time I've ever publicly said anything about being depressed, having anxiety, having a meltdown, anything, every single time you put something out in the world just to say that you're struggling, you don't realize how many other people you help by just being honest about what's going on, rather than showing the tiny minutiae part of your life that actually looks like everything's progressing. My one little bit of advice is embrace winter. Like I do think if you're in the northern hemisphere and everything is getting dark and the days are shrinking and stuff, roll with it. Our bodies are more attuned to what's going on than we know. So get rest and sleep and snuggle down, and don't judge yourself like if you eat too much chocolate over the Christmas holidays, which is exactly what I plan on doing. And lots of veggies. Speaking of Christmas Angels, this new little introduction that I'm trying out. Before we wrap up the show today, guys, you wanted to just take a second to talk about the new podcast.
So all I kind of want to say on that point is that we have launched the Super Angel podcast this week. It's for angels across Europe that are what I call a bit the new generation of angels, typically with operator backgrounds, or at least very embedded in the founder ecosystem, see very much eye to eye. And of course, since it's pan-European, we also have a very much a perspective that is trying to foster more connections across Europe. That's what European VC has always been about. And then I want to say one last thing in the connection of that podcast, which is I am really coming to realize that, yes, we focus on European VC, of course, but in a way it's sad that we have for 2 years not been focusing enough on angels as well, because there is an angel world that I think we can do a lot in as well. Now we'll just come from the VC scene doing that, but I do see that the conversations we have on the European angel are very, very close to the ones we have on the European VC. It's just conversations from the perspective of investing out of your own wallet, and typically also having a day job at the same time, and how you make that kind of thing match, rather than on the European VC. Of course, we have always end up talking a lot about firm building and how to raise capital for your fund and all those type of things. So in that sense, it's very different. But on the other hand, it's the same type of people. It's the same investing activity. So I do very much look forward to 2023 and seeing how we can come to be what we are on the VC scene for the angel scene. That's probably the ambition that I would say that I have for 2023.
It's the funnest jingle we've ever made, and the first episode with Roxanne from Station F is out. It's quite interesting. I really enjoyed listening to it. I wasn't in that recording, so that's also cool, kind of seeing the recordings coming out and me not really knowing what they're about. It's really, really, really fun. And if any angels or aspiring angels are listening in, I hope they lend it an ear and shoot us some feedback. We'd love to improve.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. On that note, we are going to wrap up the show. If, like any of us you've heard today, you're feeling a little bit delicate, do look after yourselves and start talking to others around you. It will have a massive impact on both of you when you do that. But for now, go check out the newsletter on EU.VC. Go to LinkedIn, where we'll continue the conversation. I think I'm going to ask Dan to share his list of tips for people that are burning out. That would be a nice one for us to share this week. We'll also be posting the latest funds that have raised, as well as the Who's Hiring section, together with a whole lot of GIFs, memes, and emojis. And we promise to entertain you. Bye.